There's a really fun theory going around that Spider-Man Far From Home is hiding one of its villains in plain sight. I think it's worth talking about, so let's dive into the latest theory from Spider-Man Far From Home. Before we do that, though, make sure you go down, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, so you can keep up to date with everything that we're doing here at CinemaBlend. Okay, so there's a character in the new Far From Home trailer that is believed to potentially be the Chameleon. If you don't know the Chameleon, he's one of the earliest villains in Spider-Man's legacy, appearing in actually the very first episode or comic of The Amazing Spider-Man 1. And the beautiful thing about the Chameleon is that he can be anybody that he wants to be. He's a master of disguise, and he often fools Spider-Man by pretending to be somebody who's either close to him or just basically hiding out underneath his nose and committing crimes of which Spider-Man can't figure out what's going on. Well, there's a character named Dimitri who's going to be on Nick Fury's team when Nick Fury and Maria Hill come to Europe to recruit Spider-Man to fight these elementals. Mysterio is also going to be on this team, but for right now, Mysterio is being positioned as a good guy who's going to be an ally to Spider-Man on this mission, and the elementals are going to be the main villains in Far From Home. They're going to sort of mirror classic Spider-Man villains like Molten Man and Hydro Man and Sandman, but together they're going to be the main villain that Spider-Man and Mysterio and Nick Fury have to fight. Dimitri, again, is going to be a member of Nick Fury's team, who is going to be positioned as the new bus driver on Peter Parker's European tour, because Nick Fury needs to get Peter from place to place where the elementals are showing up. So this Dimitri character is going to reroute the bus and travel to all the different places where Nick Fury needs Peter to go. Now, Dimitri is going to stand out as a name that Spider-Man fans might know because it was the actual name of the character of the Chameleon in the Spider-Man comic books. When Dimitri was introduced way back in the 1960s, he was the alter ego of the Chameleon, and the Chameleon would work with other characters like Kraven the Hunter and also Mysterio when creating problems for Spider-Man, again in the pages of the comic books. You might believe that they're just going to stash Dimitri there as a person who's working for Nick Fury, and later on will be revealed to be the Chameleon. And in fact, when we visited the set of Spider-Man Far From Home, we spoke to John Watts, the director, about this, and he gave us a very vague sort of answer of saying, look, I'm not going to confirm that the character of Dimitri is the Chameleon, but I'm also not going to confirm it. It's not too crazy far off to think that there are other villains in Far From Home besides the one that we've met, because even when you go back to Spider-Man Homecoming, there were different versions of characters like the Tinkerer. We met two different Shockers. There was a tease for a Scorpion, even though the Vulture was the main villain. And so I largely believe that Mysterio is going to end up becoming a villain in the MCU, and potentially by the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Sony and Marvel are sort of populating the universe with potential villains that they could lean on later, and of course using the Chameleon in a small role to eventually use him in a movie later would make a whole lot of sense. So this character of Dimitri, who's working for Nick Fury and is going to end up becoming Peter Parker's bus driver, might actually be the Chameleon. There's an even bigger theory regarding the Chameleon, however, and this is a bit of a stretch, so I'm not sure I'm ready to take this step, but let's talk about what some other people are saying online at the very least. They're looking at the clothing that Nick Fury is wearing as he recruits Peter Parker to join this mission to stop the elementals, and they're pointing out the fact that it's very classic old Nick Fury, circa Iron Man 2, with the long flowing coat and a look that sort of Nick had when he was in the earlier days of the MCU. Some people are speculating that because of this specific look that Nick Fury is sporting, that he might actually be the Chameleon, pretending to be Nick Fury. And they're pointing out the fact that in the early cut of the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, Nick Fury says something along the lines of, "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Spider-Man." That line was audio patched and fixed in the new Far From Home trailer, where he says, "You're a hard person to track down, Spider-Man." And that was probably just because now that we know what happens in Endgame, they had to fix that line because it didn't make sense anymore. I also think it would be a really big stretch to have Chameleon pretending to be Nick Fury. That's a big bait and switch. So if the movie ends up giving us Mysterio pretending to be a good guy who ends up being a bad guy, and then Chameleon pretending to be Nick Fury, he's not Nick Fury at all, that seems like a lot of misdirection that is possible, I suppose. When you have the Chameleon, he can end up being, playing any character essentially in the universe. But I almost feel like that's a bit too big of a step for Marvel and Sony to take. What I'd like to see is this character of Dimitri end up becoming not Chameleon, but even Kraven the Hunter, who is a character that we haven't seen played out in the Spider-Man movies yet. and I think he'd be fantastic villain for an upcoming Spider-Man sequel. However, I'm not quite sure that Homecoming and Far From Home are laying the groundwork for Kraven to come into this universe, but it would be fun to see if that were the case. Tell me, guys, what do you think? Is the Chameleon going to be revealed to be in Spider-Man Far From Home, or is this just the type of, comic book frenzy that we like to whip up as we wait for a movie to reach theaters? Spider-Man Far From Home will be in theaters on July 2nd. All of our coverage will continue to lead us up to the opening of that anticipated sequel, which is going to continue Peter Parker's journey through the MCU. You don't want to miss any of our stories that we will post to CinemaBlend's YouTube page regarding Spider-Man Far From Home. So go down, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and we'll see you here next time we post a new video.
You're right, you may not be ready, but this is my responsibility. Saving the world requires sacrifice. Sometimes people die.